Well, of course, we're going to talk about Tropical Storm Fiona as it heads west, tropical storm warnings for the Northern Leeward Islands, tropical storm watches for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about our beautiful weather, and we'll get into the weekend and the long range, which has all sorts of fabulous puzzle pieces for us to look at with regards to the weather for next week. All of that and more on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area to make sure that your home is working right, make sure it's looking great, and make sure that you're prepared just in case we do get adverse weather, and that may include a tropical storm or a hurricane, and it may not. Uh, so just remember, it's better to be safe and sorry. Make sure your generator's in tip-top shape, or maybe you don't have one. Go get one. Pumps, batteries, flashlights, they're all there, plus topsoil, and come this wintertime, tons and tons of salt. 631-756-1125, the telephone number, and as only Joe Rayo can say it, the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. David Rico on the chat board says, I hear Joe, but I don't see him. But that's only because Joe isn't there yet.
correct.
Joe's there now. Now both of us are here.
That's,
Voila.
That's called the show open, followed by the show sponsor,
Yes.
followed by anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour of uninterrupted programming. Where else can you go but get an hour, 45 minutes to an hour of weather with no commercial interruption after we get started, of course.
Absolutely.
So
So we have Fiona on the map, and Joe, from the way I'm looking at things here, it would appear that it's going to be kind of the fair to midland tropical system until about the end of Sunday, early next week, and then at least the GFS seems to suddenly boost it in intensity. Although even if it does go through that boost, it does not look like, if you take the GFS at face value, that it will
which
have
I
any
don't,
say.
by the way, but go ahead.
Yeah, that it would have any say in the weather along the eastern seaboard, save for maybe creating some sea swells, because there's going to be a humongous high pressure dome of high pressure that's going to be building in our direction for the middle and latter part of next week, which may actually help to suppress or keep the storm out of the picture for us. But then again, we're talking about a week or so in advance, and anything can happen between now and then. So we'll see. But we finally do have at least a named storm to talk about.
Well, yes, and I think going back to last night, Joe, it's the GFS at 12Z, which by the way, it's completely different at 18Z, just so you know, which was completely different from 6Z. I don't know the tropical tidbits, which is almost everyone's go-to place for maps, for some reason is having a problem getting the 18Z GFS in. I'm sure Levi Cowan is working on it, but look, here's what it boils down to on the GFS from earlier today, which takes a Category 4 hurricane right over Bermuda as it runs out to sea. Okay, so the GFS strengthens this. To me, I mean, it just considering what's out there right now. I'm not saying it can't get to that, but considering what we're looking at right now, it's hard for me to fathom that it's going to suddenly find itself in an environment that's going to be supportive of this strengthening to a Category 4 hurricane. And the thing is, because it strengthens it the way it does, and it's also much faster than the other, well, it strengthens it. And then because it gets so strong, it starts to turn poleward. And as a result, you've got this trough that's coming through the northeast early next week on Tuesday, and that creates an opening in the ridge off the southeast coast, and it exploits it, goes up, and goes over Bermuda, which is I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It's a plausible scenario if you wind up seeing a strengthening hurricane. But what if you wind up with this sort of sheared tropical system that never really gets much beyond what it is right now, starts to interact with the islands, starts to interact with the mountains on those islands, and stays where the circulation stays intact, but on the weak side. And that responds to the lower level easterlies that can go to carry it further to the west. That's the argument that the European and the Canadian model both give. And I'm sort of leaning to that idea that you're going to have a weaker system that is going to go uh, over the islands or just north of the islands or even just south of the islands. It's not going to be able to develop for a whole host of reasons. Remember, we still have that deep trough off the southeast coast way up at 25, 30,000 feet. The Hurricane
Right.
Center, the Hurricane Center said in their discussion, there's shear all over the place. So if that's the case, I think the Europeans' idea, which is sort of a compromise of all three models, is probably not out of the question. And it's another scenario that's plausible. And I'm slightly leaning in that direction that you're going to have a weaker system that's going to wind up going further west before it makes any kind of northward turn. And the 18Z, the 18Z GFS. Should I show it now or should we lead up to it?
Well, I haven't been able to see it because on Tropical Tidbits, the 18Z is being delayed. But did you get it from another?
Yeah, I have
Another
it.
source?
I have it from Pivotal. So should I?
Okay.
You want me to show it now, or should we wait? Should we?
Do you want to show it now or wait until we get home?
Right. Or should
Shoot it now. Shoot it now.
or should we or should we lead into what Fiona is doing right now and everything else and then show it? You tell me.
Well, let's lead into what it's showing right now, and then we'll use that to lead into what the 18Z is showing.
Okay, I think that's fair. Big hellos to everybody on the chat board. We're going to do a very different Briller Jeopardy a little later on, so stick around and this was put together by Johnny Quest, who spent quite a bit of time coming up with this. I don't even know what the question is. I don't even know what the answer is. Neither does Joe Rayo, but we're going to do this later on, so make sure you stick around for that. And of course, if you're new to the show, welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We're on every night, Monday through Thursday, usually at 7:30 Eastern Time, and Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. We take Friday and Saturday off unless there's a storm running around. And Joe's, you said you may be tied up both days. I may pop on tomorrow and again on Saturday at least to do an update. So just to let everybody know ahead of time that. Watch for your notifications tomorrow. There may be a Joe and Joe weather show. But let's look at the satellite loop, shall we? Surely. Okay. So we're going to look at the Fiona satellite loop. This is the floater image. And I recommend, by the way, if you go to the GOES satellite site, you could look at this on that wide Atlantic view. Okay, but if you look on the options on the top, it says active storms, and you go on there and you could pick Fiona, and then on the next page you can get I think it's the RGB menus or RBG, whatever they call it. There's a menu there on the top, so you can get all the different types of satellites that they have. And I have the one here. This is the one that's supposed to have the lightning strikes on it, but you can see there's not a whole lot that's picking up in terms of lightning strikes. A couple of thunderstorms in there, but one thing you will notice on this, and it's really important, if you look on the visible part, what is clear, Joe, you see that the center is almost completely exposed out to the east of where all the main convection is. And they did up the winds to 60 miles an hour, which is not a huge surprise. But with the center exposed like that, it's telling you that there's a ton of shear going on. In fact, look on the upper left and you see clouds moving southwest to northeast. The mid-level clouds are moving fairly quickly southwest to northeast there. So there's some strong southwest shear or westerly shear going on here. And I think that's going to be problematic with this going forward. That's why I'm kind of leaning against the idea of the GFS blowing up a hurricane so quickly.
Well, we've been saying for the last couple of days that system causing all the shear would be a problem. would be problematic for Fiona as it headed west northwestward, and we could see that that is exactly the case. That is what's happening. That's probably also why, from now through at least Sunday, the storm really does not rev up to any significant degree. It pretty much holds at around 50 or 60 mile per hour sustained winds near the center, and then maybe after Sunday it will begin to, if the GFS is correct, rev up, so to speak, and rev up rather rapidly and strengthen rather rapidly. But for the next several days, this is going to be just a storm that's going to be fighting off the shear, so to speak, as best it can, or as best to survive.
Oh, and another thing, by the way, which I think is really important here going forward in terms of the forecast, is the fact that it has not gained any latitude at all since yesterday. It has not gotten further north. In fact, it may have actually at some point overnight moved a little south of due west. So the longer it takes to gain latitude, I think that that'll give much more support to the European and Canadian idea, which is to take a weaker southern route through the islands, or maybe both south and north of the islands, depending on where we're talking about at the start or at the middle part or at the end. But the GFS would lead you to the idea that this thing would say skim the northern leewards and maybe go over Puerto Rico and miss the Dominican Republic completely. And as it moves north of there, it starts to move north from there. It would start to strengthen, and as you said, it could strengthen pretty rapidly. Which to me, it's gonna, at least right now, from what I'm looking at, I'm thinking that the sheared look is going to keep this thing from getting much beyond a mid-level tropical storm, at least for a while, at least for the
Right.
next few days.
Right.
And that ultimately,
I would agree.
That would ultimately, I think, be critical to where this winds up. All right, so let's look at some of the guidance, the intensity guidance. Now, here's the thing with the intensity guidance, which this is the 18Z intensity guidance, and all of a sudden I can't seem to be able to make it a little bigger. But you'll notice there are models that, well, there are two models that have this a hurricane in 36 hours. Okay, actually three models, and one of them has it a Category 1 hurricane within 30 hours. It's hard for me to see that happening considering the sheared look that we have right now. Then there are a few others that turn it into a hurricane by 84 hours. So I think that when you match these up with their, I don't know if any of these have surface plots that go with it. I'm assuming that they do. Those are the ones that are probably taking tracks that are furthest to the north. You look at the ones that are down in the tropical storm zone, and a couple of them that are down near the bottom of the tropical storm zone. Those are the models that are probably taking this further to the south or keeping it south longer. There are far more of those models doing that, and the actual track guidance has, interestingly enough, almost all of them except for one, Joe, get this to between seven. Actually, two of them. One is just barely shy of 70, but the rest of them all get this between 70 and 75, south of 25 degrees north. That's always a place where you got to be you have to be careful. Then it could go either way. But there aren't that many models that are taking this out, turning it before 70. There's just two. And the GFS from earlier today was one of those. So the cluster suggests a left track. While I have the opportunity, why don't I let's look at the ensembles and ensemble.
Ensembles.
Yes. Yeah, and her members. She's got quite a bridge club. But ensembles. Now here are the ensembles on the GFS. And I mean, they all turn it, they get it to about 72 west or so, and then start to turn it to the northeast. Most of them actually have this passing to the left of Bermuda, believe it or not. But I mean, look, it's got, it takes it. It basically takes it almost north of Puerto Rico here. You see how the pressures go. 1,003. These are the mean ensemble pressures. The actual operational model pressures go much lower when you go up further north. But you know, 03, 97, then an 87, then a 75, then a 68. So this is the GFS ensembles. You see what the operational did. This should not be a shock to anybody that the ensembles are, and the mean position is where it is. The Canadian ensemble I thought was interesting because if you follow you look at the plots, they're all over the place. I mean, you got some of them that turn it, but more of them actually take it west northwest. And the Canadian ensemble is actually very close. It's actually only slightly to the right of the European's track. So remember what Tony Gigi said, Joe. When the European and the Canadian are on the same page, uh, you have to give that some credence.
Well, the Canadian was the one that had the storm tracking into the Gulf of Mexico, whereas the European, this a couple of days ago, the European and the GFS had the storm, centered or tracking to the right of the Atlantic seaboard, and the Canadian had it moving into the Gulf of Mexico. So this track that you're showing right now still shows that the Canadian is trying to move the storm closer to the Gulf as opposed to tracking it away from the Atlantic coast.
Well, and weak means further west. In a case like this, and I'll explain why here. And by the way, just so everybody's clear on this, okay, if you're watching this show thinking we're going to have the answer to what's going to happen, we're not. Okay, no one is. I mean, there are people out there that'll probably think or lead you to think that they know what's going on. With the usual posting of maps a million miles away, but not with a whole lot of context. So make sure you get context with these things. So here's the GFS. Okay, you look at the GFS 500, the Western Atlantic view. So what is all of this? So we're really looking at the 18,000 foot level, and there's not a whole lot with regards to what goes on down here in the areas south of say 30 degrees north, especially in the wintertime. You get the troughs that go down to Florida and go down into the Gulf states. Sometimes they reach all the way down to Cuba. But here we are, late summer. There's usually just one big high and not much else. But you have a very strong ridge. This is what represents Fiona, that little closed height line that you see there. You see where the Leeward Islands are. There's also a bit of a ridge, a weaker ridge, that's sitting across the Gulf states, and by the way, is bringing us absolutely gorgeous weather here. It was down in the 40s again this morning, but we made it up to about 73 or 4 this afternoon, which is an absolutely spectacular day. So, what's going on? All right, so let's roll through the upper air and see how it changes. You'll see that ridge out in the Atlantic kind of weakens and repositions itself a little bit, but it's still strong enough, driving Fiona, the Fiona feature, over the island of Puerto Rico. And then, as we said earlier, there's a trough that's going to be moving through the eastern part of the United States early next week on Tuesday. And you can only see the bottom of the trough on this view. It's right here. And here's a strengthening upper high over Oklahoma and Arkansas. Here's the Atlantic ridge that's sort of cradling it. And right here, right there, is a hold. So if we do start to see this thing strengthen the way it is, it's going to exploit that weakness and turn northward and then eventually turn northeastward, which is what the model did. It splits the ridge in two. The ridge in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Oklahoma, strengthens and shifts a little bit further westward. The Atlantic ridge weakens and shifts a little bit further eastward, and up it goes. That trough picks it up and say goodbye, passes right over Bermuda, or just northwest of Bermuda this time, and then it goes on its merry way into the open waters of the Atlantic. Now,
that was the 12Z, right?
That was the 12Z. Now I'm going to switch to the 18Z. So I'm sorry. Now I'm going to switch to the European. Now remember, the European's got a weaker system. In fact, I'm going to roll it back. So here we are. This is tonight, roughly 18Z 21-0. The upper feature is, you see where the height line goes like this, folks? There's lower pressure right there. There's your upper high. There's your ridge over the Gulf states and Tennessee. Same setup. All right, so it's going to be a little harder to follow along on the European because you have a weaker feature. So it actually kind of loses it a little bit. You see that right there. That is now Fiona. It's a little further south than what the GFS has. This is on Sunday. The upper air features flattish high. When I say flat, it's because it's not pushing up all the way, say, into the Ohio Valley. It's kind of just sort of laying there. Uh, in the southeast and over the Gulf. You could just sort of follow the height line along there. So it's kind of trapped under that ridge, and we'll keep on going. So now we're going to move to Monday night, Tuesday, where we have that trough that's moving off the East Coast. Well, guess what? The Europeans got the trough. This is Tuesday morning. Get to Tuesday morning. There you go. There's a number of missing maps here for some reason. But uh, it the trough. This is on Tuesday morning is just coming off the East Coast. The ridge is holding on. You do have a little bit of weakness there off the southeast coast, and here's the other upper high that's out to the west. So this is still trapped underneath the ridge in the Atlantic. And as we go forward, look what happens. This is Friday evening. There's the weakness. Look how far south it is. It's over Haiti. It's over western Cuba, and then right after that, that weakness closes, and high pressure builds again. And now, of course, at this point, Joe, the deep trough that both the European and the GFS have coming into southeastern Canada and northern New England, that's going to bring a really nice cool high in for the end of later next week. That happens on both models, but look at the difference in the positioning of the European because it carries a weaker system. It goes much further to the west and
into the Bahamas.
Into the Bahamas, and when we look at the surface, and I'm going to switch now because again it was sort of incomplete in terms of he must be having some problems. So we'll go to the EC fast, which I think will give us the answer here. And I'll go to the lower dynamics and go to the mean sea level pressure. Make sure I got the European. This is today. This is tomorrow. Oh, this is the new one that started. Okay, hold on.
18Z.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
It just started. Let me go to the old one. So here's the old one. So out we have our weekend, of course. We've got this front that comes through Monday night, Tuesday. That's with that trough. Fiona is it's not even into the screen here. It's just, you can see the isobars down at the bottom. And there it goes. So now you've got this super trough and cold front that comes through the east on Thursday with that big high building in. And look where Fiona goes on the European. It goes in somewhere north of Vero Beach and moves up into north central Florida by the time we get to 240 hours. Again, as a tropical storm, as a strong tropical storm. Again, and look at that big high to the north. That's going to make for a lovely gradient if that works out, particularly for the mid and South Atlantic there. Where are we in the moon phase, by the way? When's the new moon?
New moon, I believe, is the 24th.
Well,
that would be a week from Saturday.
And this is Sunday the 25th. So you see the differences in the two in the 12Z GFS and the European. The differences between this and the GFS, which by 12Z Sunday is long. Oh, he's got the 18Z on this plot. Okay, I don't even have to show you pivotal. I can show it to you on this one. All right, hang on. Don't get excited yet, Joe.
Yeah.
But here's again. It gets caught by that Tuesday trough, pulls northward. It's a much stronger storm, 939. That's a Category 4 hurricane aiming right for Bermuda. The Thursday cold front moves through, picks it up, kicks it out to the northeast, and then, it goes goodbye. So the key, if the GFS is going to be right, you're going to need this to strengthen. If it starts to show signs of strengthening as it approaches the Leeward Islands and really gets organized and increases the probability that this could become a hurricane while it's still moving through that part of the Atlantic, that might raise the odds of the GFS being correct. If it stays weak, it raises the odds of something like the European or the Canadian. Now, let's go to the 18Z. Well, everybody is getting very excited. So, you know what? Before I use this view, let's look at the North Atlantic view. Um,
Let's not start rattling the sabers, so to speak, for the 18Z for all of
no,
you
no, I understand.
crazy.
But here's the 18Z on the GFS, which now keeps the system weak, Joe. Takes it over the Northern Leewards, takes it just south of Puerto Rico. Actually, by a fair distance, south of the Dominican Republic, south of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. That's a change. And then all of a sudden, it starts to emerge on the other side next Tuesday night. Of course, the Tuesday trough is long gone here, and then starts to strengthen rapidly as it moves up the coast. And of course, you see it here. There's a 940 pressure east of Charleston, south of Cape Hatteras, grazes the Carolinas, and runs north-northeast from there to just south and east of Cape Cod and Nantucket as a strong Category 3 hurricane, and then finds its way to Nova Scotia. So now instead of going to Bermuda, instead of going out at 65, it's closer to 75. So it's almost 10 degrees further to the left. So bottom line is, as I said earlier, the key to all of this is going to be how weak, and how long does it stay weak? Because the longer it stays weak, the further west it goes, and then we'll know the answers to the questions maybe over the weekend as to what the outcome of this is going to be.
Well, we're just gonna have to wait and see. I'm not gonna even. We've been saying for so long that much beyond 3, 4, 5 days, these models will change their minds at a drop of a pin, and still think that this system is going to stay pretty much out of the picture for us. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I am not putting I'm not putting my cards away on any one particular place, if at all. I certainly will acknowledge the fact that this could also still wind up going. I'm going to bring you up full screen before we're going to go back to the maps in a minute, but let's bring us both together here. I'm not discounting anything at this stage. I still think, as I said yesterday, it's too many puzzle pieces running around. And by the way, we haven't even touched on the fact that the other important part of this is what's going on in the Pacific, because we do have a couple of typhoons that are recurving and heading up toward the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea, and those love to ripple the weather pattern across North America in time. So those are two other players here that are going to be part of the equation.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Anything that's heading up toward, let's say, the Bering Strait, with any significant amount of tropical moisture and low barometric pressure, could certainly upset the cart, so to speak, change the game plan all around the top of the world, all around the top of the northern hemisphere. And again, that would play into what may eventually happen here by the middle and latter part of next week with Fiona. So a lot of things need to be worked out. We'll be watching this very carefully on a daily basis. But again, right now, I wouldn't sweat anything, because right now it appears that, Joe, we're going to be in a very nice, quiet, tranquil weather pattern through the upcoming weekend. Next chance for any showers, I think, around here won't be until about Monday. But you know what? Sometimes when you have these long stretches of quiet, you're lulled into a false sense of security that, nothing's going to happen. We don't need to worry about anything. And then all of a sudden, nature lowers the boom on you quite suddenly. So enjoy the stretch of nice weather, but just keep an eye on Fiona, and let's see how things happen in the days to come.
And speaking of nice stretches of weather, as we just switch over to what Joe mentioned, of course, most of the weather around the country right now is actually fairly quiet. So we've got our high here in the east. It's going to resettle itself off the mid-Atlantic coast as we go into the weekend. The humidity is going to come up a little bit on Sunday, but not crazy. I noticed the dew points get back up to 60 or low 60s. I mean, that's not too bad. It's certainly not 70, so that's good. And temperatures are going to respond too. We'll probably be back up maybe low 80s on Saturday, and I'm thinking mid to upper 80s possible on Sunday. There's a bit of a backdoor front up in northern New England. That's not a problem, but there is an upper trough that's come through with a weak cold front on Monday night. As you said, Joe, there'll be some showers and storms with that. And then the weather sort of calms down. Of course, the latter part of next week, we don't know what Fiona's going to wind up doing. Both the European and the GFS have this strong cold front coming through with this nice big high toward the end of to the end of next week, with those lovely thicknesses down in the 552, 558-ish range. Although one of the runs overnight, I think, had like a 522 to thickness at Plattsburgh or something. But it is a nice, dry, cool air mass that comes into the east, and we'll see what happens going forward. I'm just looking out to 300 hours, Joe. Except for some rain in Texas, the whole country is dry. I mean, there's just not a lot going on.
No, it's going to be a relatively quiet weather pattern. I noticed that Climate Prediction Center does have a chance for excessive amounts of rain, I guess, precipitation-wise, across the southeast coast for the 24th to the 26th. And of course, that's probably because of Fiona and the uncertainties as to where Fiona may end up and whether or not enough tropical moisture heads far enough west to influence adversely, let's say, coastal Georgia or South and North Carolina. We'll see how that, again, all pans out. But otherwise, again, a rather quiet weather pattern shaping up for the days to come.
Yep. And WPC, by the way, on their forecast from southern New England. Now, I took the map off. I'm not going to show it, or maybe let me just bring it up. I might as well just bring it up, and then we'll get ready for this. What could be a stunning Briller Jeopardy here. So hang on one second. So take a look at this 7-day rainfall forecast map, okay? And to look at the extent of the area that's not going to see a drop of rain from Texas, except for right along the immediate coast and the immediate Gulf Coast, and then down to Florida, South Florida, so showing some heavy amounts from Texas east across the Gulf states, up the eastern seaboard to southern New England, and then west across the Ohio Valley, except when you get to near the lower lakes, not a drop of rain for the next 7 days. So that takes us through next Thursday night. There is some rain being indicated toward the end, and this is going to be toward the end of the period in the coastal Carolinas. Again, that might be Fiona driven. It might not be. We don't know. It's too early on that regard. But as always with these things, Joe, it's always a forecast challenge. When you're out a week ahead of time, I always find it enjoyable to speculate, look at the models, and look at the different directions that they're all taking us. And I try not to make definitive statements this early in the game, so I'm not going to make one now. And the chairman, Scott Briller, is hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you, Scott. A very special Briller Jeopardy after 3 years. I found a very hard question. This question was been done by Johnny Quest. Okay, Johnny Quest, and he says the question is: there were 15 retired. Oh, this is going to be. Oh, can we? Good luck with this. 15, Joe. 15, not 14, not 16, not a dozen. 15 retired hurricane names in the East Pacific Basin. Can you name all 15? I can name one. Okay? I can name one. Patricia.
How about it? No, this would be the Central Pacific. I was thinking the storm that hit Kauai back in 1992, but that would be a Central Pacific storm. I think it was Anuki or Aniki. Aniki, but
no.
that would be on that list.
No, but Patricia is on that list, and Patricia was, I think that I forgot what the lowest pressure was on that 870 something. Did it go down below 870? I think it might have, and they were carrying winds of over 200 miles an hour on the advisory. I think that was one of the only times I have ever seen a maximum sustained wind of over 200 miles an hour in a hurricane advisory. So it was Hurricane Patricia is definitely on that list. Uh, that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head for some reason. Oh, the name. And Leon Probitsky hitting super chat tonight. Thank you, Leon. But Patricia's the only one. The only other name that comes into my mind is Olivia, but I'm thinking that that was an Atlantic storm that crossed over. I don't know what the Atlantic storm name was, but it crossed over and became Olivia. So I have no idea otherwise what the rest of the retired storms were in the Eastern Pacific. Scott Briller says, think of an H storm that was in the Atlantic. An H storm. Harvey? I don't know.
Are there any storms on the list in the Pacific that were also used in the Atlantic? Is that what you're talking about? A storm that may have crossed over, or?
No, I mean these were. I think he's talking about retired named storms in the Eastern Pacific, uh, uh, in the Eastern Pacific basin. They had a form in the East Pacific. They probably went into Mexico on the West Coast.
Somebody here on the list says Herman. Mark G says Herman, but I don't know if that's on the list.
Yeah, I mean, this
Herminia,
Hermione.
Hermione.
Hermione, yes.
Yeah. Oscar.
Oscar how about oh, I remember one that was a big deal. I don't remember all the consequences to it. Odie. Odile or Odie, Odile, Odile. I think that went into the Baja California as a category 4. That could be one. Somebody tell us if the answers are right. I know Patricia was.
How about I'm thinking here. I'm thinking of storms that have a Latin American flavor to it. Luis? No, that would be an Atlantic storm.
The
chairman begins with H and ends with Z.
It ends with Z? The only name I can think of with an H that has a Z in it, Joe, is Hazel.
Well, we had a hazel, a very famous hazel that affected the eastern United States. In fact, I think it affected Ontario, Canada. That's what I was asking. Is it possible that we had storms that had the same name in the Pacific?
Yeah, well, so has anybody posted whether those two guesses were correct or not?
Well, that couldn't be the case because the chairman is saying that it begins with H and ends in Z, and hazel begins with H and ends in L.
Yeah,
there's a Z in hazel, but it's in the middle.
Yeah, I know. I can't think of a name that starts with an H and ends in a Z. Like Chuck Cardillo. Hertz Rent-A-Car. Max Brengel says Manuel. That rings a bell. Manuel or Manuel. Max Brengel also says Pauline was a category 4 on the Pacific side. All right.
Okay.
You know what? Why don't we at this point, because this is very difficult.
All right. I just went on Wikipedia, and now I have the list in front of me. So I'm gonna run the list down right now.
Okay.
The names are Hazel.
Okay.
See, there it is, Hazel.
Right.
1965. Adele. 1970. May 30th to June 7th, 1970. Fico, or is it FICO?
Well, it's a FICO score, but
yeah. July 9th to 28th, 1978. Newt, KNUT, August 28th through August 30th, 1987. And then there's Ava, starts with an I, I-V-A. Iva, August 5th to 13th, 1988. Then there's FIFA, F-E-F-A, July 29th to August 8th, 1991. I have no memory of that. Ishmael, Ishmael, September 12th to 16th, 1995. Pauline is there, Joe. Pauline from October 5 to 10, 1997. Then there's the meat tenderizer tropical system. Adolf, May 25th to June 1st, 2001. Penna, October 22nd to 26, 2002. Isis, September 8th to 16, 2004. Alma, May 29th and 30th, 2008. Manuel, September 13th to 19, 2013. Odile, Odile.
Odile.
Odile. Odile. Ondele. Ondele. Odile. September 10th to 16th, September 10th to 18th, 2014. And finally, Patricia, October 20th to 24th, 2015. And just as a throw in here as a bonus, in the Central Pacific, we have Iwa, or Iwa, IWA, in November of 1982. And Nikki, I mentioned that at the very start, September 5th to 13th, 1992, a Category 4 hurricane that slammed into Kauai in Hawaii. Paka, November 28th to December 23rd. That was a long lasting time. It was a super typhoon, Joe. Category 5 super typhoon with winds of 185 miles per hour, which affected the Marshall Islands, Guam, and the Mariana Islands. That was Paka, November 28th to December 23rd, 1997. And finally, Ioke, IOKE, August 20th to September the 9th, a Category 5, which hit the Johnson Atoll and Wake Island with 160 mile per hour winds, again in 2006.
I'm just reading here that political considerations prompted the retirement of Adolf and removal of the name Israel. Okay, at the start of the 2001 season, since controversies arose over their name use. Kenna was retired in 2003 because it became one of the most intense Pacific hurricanes ever recorded. Alma, after it had become the first East Pacific tropical cyclone on record to make landfall along the Pacific coast of Central America. That's unusual. I'm looking through this list, Joe. There are a few storms here where, like FIFA in Hawaii, Iva, Newt. None of those storms caused damage. So they didn't even make landfalls. I mean, there wasn't really anything outstanding in terms of their strength either. So I would be curious as to why those names were retired, but no matter. But Patricia, October 20 to 24, 2015, 215 miles an hour was carried on the advisory, and the lowest pressure 872 millibars, which I think that was lower than Wilma. So this holds the record, I think, the lowest in the northern in either the Atlantic Basin or the East Pacific or the Central Pacific Basin in terms of the lowest pressures on record. Very interesting. We don't often talk about East Pacific storms unless they're hitting land in Mexico or something else causes them to stand out. So it was a nice, interesting exercise that we that we just went through. So now, so here's the deal. Tomorrow and Saturday. So you're not here tomorrow. Saturday is a slight possibility, but you have things to do. But I will. I'll come on at some point tomorrow night, and then maybe again on Saturday, and update things with regards to what's going on with Fiona and the weather. And then Joe and I will be back on Sunday. Is that correct?
Yes.
At the usual shopping time, 11 a.m. Eastern?
I guess so. Whatever fits your schedule.
Okay, we'll do that. Super chat hits tonight from Leon Probitsky and the chairman. Thank you both. Johnny Quest, thank you for the hard work that you put into coming up with this question. It was a torturous one. And don't think about going to the West Pacific, okay? Because outside of Typhoon Tip, which Max Brengel is mentioning, and maybe a couple of others that might come to my feeble brain, which is getting feebler by the day. Yeah, I'm not going to get many of those. So, we'll see you. We'll possibly see you tomorrow and Saturday. Definitely see you Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. 90. Oh, the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Your go-to place for hardware to make sure your house is working well, working right, looking good, and is definitely protected in case there's a tropical storm or hurricane. 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Joe.
Good night. Bleh.